The first thing Ethan noticed wasn't the smell of coffee or the sound of forklifts. It was laughter. Bright, full laughter, echoing across the loading dock of the Freshways building. For a second, he thought it had to be someone else's kid. His son hadn't laughed like that in months. He'd shown up earlier than usual that Tuesday. A canceled meeting, a restless feeling, and the thought that maybe he could surprise Noah at the daycare before heading home. But as he walked toward the back lot, the sound of small voices and squeaky bike wheels pulled him off course. There, between the white painted lines of the parking lot, a man in a reflective vest had set up a crooked row of orange cones. 4 kids were taking turns pushing little balance bikes through the path, their shoes brushing the ground for control. And right in the middle of them, helmet crooked, cheeks flushed with joy, was Noah. Ethan froze. His son, who had always been nervous about losing balance, was now coasting several feet at a time, laughing so hard he nearly forgot to steer. "Eyes up, champ," the man in the vest called out. "You've got this." The man was tall, with kind eyes and a steady voice, the kind that made kids feel safe. He jogged alongside the group, matching their rhythm, letting them wobble but never fall. Ethan's instinct was to step in. He glanced at the asphalt, at the slope, at the cones that clearly weren't regulation anything. This can't be safe, he thought. He started walking toward them. The man noticed him first. "You must be Dad," he said easily, wiping his hands on his vest. "Jordan Brooks. We wrapped up daycare early, so I asked if a few kids wanted to try balance bikes. We've got permission forms signed." Ethan blinked, trying to process what he was seeing. "This is company property," he said, hearing his own voice come out sharper than he meant. "If someone gets hurt..." Jordan didn't flinch. "Then we learn safely. I'm right here the whole time. Smoother than most sidewalks out there. I used to be a medic. I know how to fall before anyone breaks anything." That answer somehow made Ethan more uneasy. A warehouse floor lead, running a bike class for kids with disabilities. It sounded like every risk management nightmare in the book. Noah noticed him then and waved, his grin wide. "Dad, look, I'm doing it." Ethan tried to hold on to the stern expression, but it slipped. "I see you, buddy," he said quietly. "That's pretty good." Jordan crouched beside Noah, helping him steady the bike. "You remember what we practiced, right? Eyes up, count your steps." Noah nodded, took a deep breath, and pushed off again. His feet lifted for 3 seconds, then 4. When he stopped, he looked down at his own shoes as if they'd just performed magic. "That's the longest one yet," Jordan said, giving him a gentle high five. Ethan watched, arms folded, trying to understand why his son was suddenly glowing with confidence he hadn't seen in so long. Jordan stood, brushing the dust off his hands. "We call it Tuesday practice. Helps the kids balance, builds muscle memory. It's cheaper than therapy, and honestly, it keeps them laughing." Ethan looked away. "Therapy isn't supposed to be fun," he muttered, before realizing how cold it sounded. Jordan just smiled. "Maybe it should be." The 2 men stood there in silence for a moment, the sound of kids cheering echoing in the background. Ethan finally said, "We'll talk later about this." "Sure," Jordan replied. "We're here every Tuesday around 6. Bring water. It gets chilly once the sun dips." Noah rolled to a stop, cheeks pink from the wind. "Dad, can I come back next Tuesday? Please." Ethan hesitated. The practical part of him screamed no. Liability, safety, company policy. Everything in his life ran on rules and structure, but the sight of his son, standing taller than usual, proud of something real, made those thoughts fade. He cleared his throat. "We'll see." Noah smiled anyway, because even a maybe sounded like hope. As the sun lowered behind the warehouse, Ethan turned to leave, but the sound of that laughter followed him to his car. Soft, stubborn, and impossible to forget. He didn't know it yet, but that small sound would soon change everything. For most of that night, Ethan couldn't stop hearing the sound of his son's laughter echoing inside his head. It was supposed to make him happy, but instead, it unsettled him. Something about the whole thing didn't sit right. A parking lot wasn't a playground, and a warehouse supervisor shouldn't be teaching balance therapy. By morning, the practical side of him had already taken over. He sat at his desk, surrounded by reports and emails, typing a message to facilities. "Please suspend all informal after-hours activities on company property until further review." He read it twice before hitting send. The words felt sterile, distant, but safe. That afternoon, when he picked Noah up from the daycare, the boy's smile nearly undid his resolve. Dad, Coach Jordan said next Tuesday we can try the big hill. Ethan froze mid-step. Hill? What hill? Noah pointed toward the gentle slope behind the loading dock, where a few orange cones still stood like small reminders of joy. It's not big, Daddy. He said I just need to breathe and count to 5. Ethan tried to soften his tone. Buddy, that might not happen again for a while. There are rules about what we can and can't do on the property. Noah's face fell so quickly it made Ethan's stomach twist. But I didn't fall. I was careful. I know, Ethan said quietly. It's just not that simple. That night, after Noah went to bed, Ethan sat in the living room staring at the dim light from his phone. His ex-wife, Sarah, had texted earlier. Noah's therapist canceled this week. Insurance mix-up again. I'll call them in the morning. He typed back, we might need a new plan. Sarah called instead of texting. You mean another expensive specialist who'll spend 15 minutes making him cry? She asked gently. Ethan, whatever that man did in the parking lot worked. Noah hasn't stopped talking about it. Ethan sighed. You didn't see it, Sarah. No helmets for half the kids, no supervision from staff. If someone gets hurt, the company's on the hook. So what? She said. We're all scared of something. You hide behind liability forms. Noah hides behind his crutches. Maybe it's time one of you stopped. Her words stung, mostly because they were true. Later that night, Ethan peeked into Noah's room before heading to bed. His son was already asleep, one hand resting on a small drawing taped to the wall. It showed a stick figure on a green bike, and another taller one beside it labeled Coach J. Ethan stood there for a long time, the guilt heavy in his chest. He wanted to believe that shutting things down was the responsible thing to do. But for the first time in years, Noah had looked alive, really alive, and Ethan had managed to take that away with a single email. As he turned off the hallway light, he caught himself whispering, maybe I overreacted. He didn't know that by the next afternoon, his message had already reached the daycare office, and Jordan was reading it on the break room bulletin board, his name printed in bold at the top. The words at the bottom were short and final. Effective immediately. All unauthorized programs are to cease until further notice. And, for the first time in a long while, the laughter that used to echo across the parking lot went completely silent. 2 days later, the parking lot felt emptier than usual. The cones were gone, the bikes stacked in storage, and the air that once carried laughter now held only the hum of trucks pulling in and out. Ethan noticed the silence every time he walked past the daycare window, though he pretended not to. That Friday, a message popped up on his phone from an unfamiliar number. Mr. Ward, it's Jordan. I understand the concern. Would you mind seeing something before you make your final call? Ethan almost ignored it, but there was something in the tone, polite, steady, not defensive, that made him pause. A few minutes later, another message arrived. YMCA gym tomorrow morning. It's where we do the official sessions. You'll see it's not chaos. It's structure. Saturday came gray and cold, and Ethan found himself standing in front of the YMCA, hands in his coat pockets, wondering why he'd agreed to this. Inside, the smell of rubber mats and chlorine filled the air. He followed the sounds of laughter down the hall until he reached the small gym. What he saw stopped him. Jordan was there, wearing a simple black hoodie, kneeling beside a group of children. They weren't racing. They were following slow, careful routines. One step, pause, shift weight, another step. He wasn't barking orders, just counting softly, like a heartbeat. Morning, Jordan called out when he saw him. Didn't think you'd actually show. I wasn't sure I would, Ethan admitted. Jordan smiled. That makes 2 of us. He led Ethan to the corner of the gym where a clipboard hung on the wall. There were charts, times, and notes written in neat handwriting. See this? He said, pointing to one line. It's called a timed walking test. Kids walk 10 feet, turn, and walk back. Noah started at 18 seconds 2 weeks ago. Last Tuesday, 16 flat. Ethan looked closer. The notes didn't read like medical reports. They were personal. Good day, strong effort, laughing more, still scared of slopes. He found his son's name circled in green marker. You're tracking all this? Every session, Jordan said. I do it for all of them. Parents get updates. We log progress. It helps them see growth in numbers, not just feelings. Ethan nodded slowly. And this is all official? Completely, Jordan replied. The Y covers liability. Volunteers are background checked, and we stay under supervision. Your son's progress. It's real. You just happen to see it in the one place without paperwork." For the first time, Ethan didn't have a ready answer. He watched Noah step onto the mat, focus, and lift his left foot higher than before. Jordan knelt nearby but didn't touch him, just clapped once when the boy steadied himself. "That's my little warrior," Jordan said quietly. Ethan swallowed hard. The scene was simple. No miracles, no fanfare, but it was progress, visible and undeniable. After class, Jordan walked him out. "Look," he said, "I get it. You're a careful guy, but sometimes progress doesn't fit inside the rules we build. It needs room to breathe." Ethan ran a hand over his face. "I'm not against progress. I just need to make sure no one gets hurt, especially Noah." Jordan nodded. "Then come next Tuesday. Watch again. If you still want to shut it down, I won't argue." Ethan hesitated. "Back at the parking lot?" Jordan grinned. "No, the hill's closed. We'll move it here. Safer ground, same spirit." Ethan managed a small smile. "You really don't give up, do you?" "Neither does your kid," Jordan said. "Guess it runs in the family." As Ethan walked back to his car, the sound of Noah's laughter drifted faintly behind him. Familiar now, but no less powerful. For the first time in a long while, he didn't want to quiet it. He just wanted to understand it. And by the next Tuesday, he would. By the next Tuesday, word had already spread through the company daycare, and a handful of parents were quietly talking about the balance bike guy. Some were curious, some were worried, and a few had already emailed the daycare asking if the program was really safe. Ethan had expected the noise, but he hadn't expected to be invited to a meeting about it. "Just an open conversation," the daycare manager, Ms. Patel, told him. "We're calling it a parent circle. People want to understand what happened and what's next." The meeting was held in the small multi-purpose room behind the cafeteria. The fluorescent lights hummed softly as half a dozen parents gathered with paper cups of coffee, their faces showing that tired blend of love and worry that every working parent carried. Jordan was there too, sitting quietly near the back in a plain sweatshirt, his reflective vest left behind. He didn't look defensive, just calm, like someone used to explaining himself. Ms. Patel began. "I know everyone's heard about the parking lot sessions. Before we make any decisions, let's listen to each other. We all want what's best for the kids." A mother spoke first. "My son has cerebral palsy. Therapy costs a fortune and the waiting lists are endless. What Jordan did, it gave my kids something to look forward to." Another parent shook his head. "But what if a child gets hurt? I can't afford another ER visit. And who covers that? The company? Us." Ethan stayed quiet for a while, listening. He could feel Jordan's eyes on him, but he didn't look back. Finally, Ms. Patel turned toward him. "Mr. Ward, since you raised the initial concern, maybe you'd like to share your thoughts." Ethan cleared his throat, his palms resting on his knees. "I didn't mean to stop something good," he began carefully. Look, I run part of this company. If something happens to a child on our property, we're all responsible. I reacted from fear, not from what I saw in my son's face." There was a long silence. Then Jordan spoke, his voice even. "You did what any parent would do, but these kids need more than protection. They need chances to prove themselves." Ethan turned toward him. "And you really think cones and parking lots are the way?" Jordan smiled faintly. "I think any place where a child laughs again is the right place to start." The room went still. A father at the end of the table exhaled. "My daughter's therapist quit last month. She hasn't moved her legs since. If there's a way to keep this going anywhere, I'd help." Ms. Patel nodded slowly. "Maybe we can find a safe middle ground. The YMCA has offered us space on Saturdays. Jordan could run it there. The company could help with equipment. Parents could sign their own waivers." Ethan leaned back, thinking. The idea made sense, but it also meant admitting he might have been wrong. He glanced at Jordan. "If I said yes to that, would you take it?" Jordan met his eyes for the first time all night. "Only if you show up too, not as the boss, just as Noah's dad." The words landed harder than Ethan expected. Ms. Patel smiled softly. "Then it's settled. The first official session, this Saturday." The parents murmured approval. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure what he was agreeing to, help or humility. As the meeting ended, he stepped outside into the crisp night air. The building lights glowed against the quiet parking lot where the cones had once stood. He could almost hear the echo of Noah's laughter carried on the wind. For the first time, he realized something simple. Safety wasn't the opposite of growth. It was the foundation for it. And maybe, just maybe, there was room in his ordered world for both. But he had no idea that the next small step, showing up on Saturday, would open a door to something much deeper than therapy. Something that would shake everything he thought he knew about control, trust, and love. Saturday morning came quietly, the kind of cool spring day when the air feels like a clean start. Ethan and Noah pulled into the YMCA parking lot, the boy chattering from the back seat about how Coach Jay promised to show him a new trick with cones and ribbons. Ethan didn't say much. He was still adjusting to the idea of being there, not as the company man, not as the fixer, just as a dad watching his son do something that scared him. Inside the gym, laughter filled the space again. A small group of kids were already moving between mats, practicing balance and turns, their parents cheering softly from the bleachers. Jordan was kneeling beside a new student, adjusting her helmet strap with the gentle precision of someone who had done this 100 times. When he saw Ethan, he smiled. "You came." "I said I would," Ethan replied, surprised by how natural it felt to say. Noah ran ahead, joining the other kids. The bright sound of his laughter returned, echoing through the gym like sunlight bouncing off walls. Sarah arrived a few minutes later, holding a paper folder. "I brought the insurance waiver they sent us," she said, handing it to Ethan. He scanned the fine print, noticing a signature already at the bottom, Jordan's. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, but one line caught his eye. Participant coach, Jay Brooks, veteran volunteer, Army Medical Corps. He frowned, looking toward Jordan. "You were a medic?" Jordan shrugged lightly. "Feels like another life." Sarah tilted her head, her eyes narrowing with surprise. "Army Medical Corps? My brother served in that unit. What year?" 2013, Jordan answered after a pause. Sarah's eyes widened. "Then you must have been at Fort Benning when the flood happened." Jordan hesitated for the first time since they'd met. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I was there." Sarah nodded slowly, her expression softening. "My brother was airlifted out that week. You guys saved him." Jordan didn't say anything for a while. He looked back toward the kids, voice low. "That was a hard time. We lost good people. I promised myself I'd do something quieter after that, something that still mattered." Ethan could feel the weight in the air, something unspoken but sincere. He looked down at the waiver again and noticed a small dog tag hanging from Jordan's keyring. The edges were worn smooth, the letters half faded. "You still carry that?" Ethan asked. Jordan nodded. "Every day, it reminds me to pay attention to the people who get overlooked." Ethan thought about his own son, about the long months he'd spent believing progress had to come from specialists with perfect resumes. Yet here was a man whose experience came from battlefields, not classrooms, teaching kids to stand tall again. Sarah placed a gentle hand on Ethan's arm. "You know, he's good for Noah. Really good." Ethan nodded, eyes still fixed on Jordan's calm, steady movements. "Yeah," he said softly. "I see that now." As the session wrapped up, Noah walked toward them, breathless and proud. "Dad, guess what? Coach Jay said I can help set up next time." Ethan smiled, bending down to meet his eyes. "That's great, buddy." Jordan approached, holding a clipboard. "If you want, we can log Noah's progress together," he offered. "I like parents to be part of the notes. It keeps everyone honest." Ethan took the clipboard, scanning the simple layout: date, distance, steps, notes. At the bottom was a line that read, "What made him smile today?" Without thinking, Ethan wrote. He laughed again. For real this time. Jordan saw the note and nodded quietly. "That's the kind of data I care about most." As they packed up to leave, Sarah glanced once more at the dog tag glinting in the gym light. There was something about it, something personal, maybe painful, that told her Jordan's story wasn't finished. And she couldn't shake the feeling that somehow their paths were connected long before Noah ever rode that first bike. She didn't know yet that the man helping her son walk again once saved her brother's life. The following week slipped by quietly, but something in the air felt different. Ethan noticed it in the way Jordan carried himself, still calm, still patient, but with a heaviness that hadn't been there before. At the YMCA, the sessions continued like clockwork. The kids practiced their small steps, counting out loud, the sound of sneakers squeaking on the mats. Noah's confidence kept growing, and every time he reached a new mark, his grin spread a little wider. But Jordan's smile, though steady, seemed distant. After class, while parents packed up snacks and helmets, Sarah caught up to him near the supply closet. "You never told us what really happened at Fort Benning," she said gently. Jordan froze for a moment, the dog tag in his hand catching the light. "There's not much to tell," he said. "Maybe not for you," Sarah replied. "But my brother still remembers the man who pulled him out when the flood hit the medical tents. He said you carried him half a mile through water." Jordan looked away. "He remembers that?" "Every day," Sarah said softly. "He thought you died in that flood." Jordan exhaled a slow, tired sound. "Part of me did." For a moment, the hallway was silent, except for the faint hum of the gym lights. "I didn't want anyone to know," he said at last. "Not because I'm ashamed, just because I'm tired of that being the only story people see. I'm not a headline. I'm just trying to help kids move forward." Sarah nodded. "That's exactly what you're doing." Before he could respond, Ms. Patel appeared at the doorway, holding a printed email. "Jordan," she said quietly, "this just came through from Freshway's legal department. It says all volunteer-led programs involving company employees have to pause until formal review." Jordan's shoulders stiffened. "They're shutting us down again?" Ethan wasn't there to hear it, but by that evening, he would get the same message sitting in his inbox. Cold, formal, and full of legal words that drained the warmth from everything the past few weeks had built. When he called Ms. Patel to ask what had happened, she sighed. "It's not me, Ethan. It's upper compliance. They're worried about liability again. Someone in the office said there's no official trainer license on file for Jordan." Ethan rubbed his forehead. He's a veteran medic with real field experience. He's been logging everything, reporting progress. Hell, he's done more for these kids than half the specialists we've paid for. "I know," she said quietly, "but rules are rules." That night, Ethan drove to the YMCA. The building was closed, the parking lot dark except for a few streetlights reflecting off puddles from the evening rain, but Jordan's old sedan was still parked near the back. He found him sitting inside, the driver's door open, music playing low. The dog tag hung from the mirror, spinning slightly in the wind. "You got the email," Jordan said without looking up. "I did." Ethan leaned against the car. "They're making a mistake." Jordan chuckled without humor. "It's not the first time someone told me to stop helping. You're not breaking rules, you're bending them for the right reasons." "Doesn't matter," Jordan said. "People like me don't get the benefit of the doubt. A black warehouse lead running therapy drills without a license. You know what that looks like on paper." Ethan didn't answer right away. He knew Jordan was right. In his world, credentials spoke louder than compassion, and Jordan had been fighting uphill his whole life. After a while, Ethan said quietly, "I'll fix this." Jordan shook his head. "You don't have to." "I want to," Ethan insisted, "because this, what you're doing, it's worth protecting." Jordan looked at him, eyes tired but steady. "Then make sure they see it that way. Don't fight for me, Ethan. Fight for Noah and every kid who still thinks falling is failure." Ethan nodded slowly. "I'll start with that." When he drove home, the rain had stopped, but the world still smelled like thunder. The email was still waiting in his inbox, demanding an official response. For once, he didn't draft a corporate statement. He just wrote one line in reply. "I'll take responsibility for the program. Let's talk tomorrow." He hit send, exhaled, and looked at the drawing Noah had taped to the fridge. A stick figure on a green bike and a tall man beside him labeled Coach J. He smiled faintly. "We're not done yet," he whispered. And he didn't know that his decision to fight would soon uncover more than paperwork. It would reveal just how far compassion could reach inside a system built on caution and fear. By Monday morning, Ethan's email had made its way to every corner of the company. Legal, HR, and compliance, all the departments that thrived on neat boxes and predictable outcomes, were suddenly calling him into meetings. In the conference room, the air felt sharp and dry. A dozen screens glowed across the long table. His assistant had tried to warn him, "They're not happy," but he'd already expected that. One of the lawyers, a woman in a gray blazer with the kind of calm that could slice steel, spoke first. "Mr. Ward, you're personally endorsing a program that's being run by a non-certified instructor. That puts the company at risk." Ethan met her eyes. "He's not an instructor," he said. "He's a coach, a mentor, and he's been helping kids, mine included, make progress that our own doctors called impossible. "That's admirable," she said flatly. "But the insurance policy doesn't care about admirable. It cares about accountability." Another executive chimed in. "Look, Ethan, this Jordan guy might be well-intentioned, but if a single kid twists an ankle, the headlines won't say 'Good man helps children.' They'll say, 'Company negligence.' You know how this works." Ethan leaned forward. "I do. And that's why I'm proposing something different." He slid a folder across the table, a drafted outline titled Adaptive Motion Pilot Program. Inside were pages of notes, waivers, schedules, and contact information for the YMCA. The program moves off-site. It's officially hosted by the Y, with proper coverage. Freshways funds it, tracks it, and gives employees paid volunteer hours to support it. Everyone wins. The room went silent. Finally, the legal head spoke again. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious," Ethan said. "And if it needs a face, I'll be the one on it. Not Jordan, not the kids. Me." The HR director frowned. "Why risk your name for this?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because I've spent years building systems that move products, not people. Maybe it's time we changed that." Later that afternoon, he met Jordan at a small diner near the YMCA. The man looked wary, like someone waiting to hear bad news again. "I went to bat for you," Ethan said, sliding into the booth. "We're moving the program to the Y. You'll lead it officially. You'll get a stipend through Freshways Community Fund, and it'll be insured." Jordan stirred his coffee slowly. "You really went through all that trouble?" Ethan nodded. "Yeah, but there's one condition." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Here it comes." "The legal team wants photo rights for internal PR," Ethan said carefully. "They want to showcase it as part of our community outreach." Jordan's face hardened. "So I get to be your poster boy?" "No," Ethan said quickly. "Not mine. The company's, but—" Jordan cut him off. "You don't get it. I've been the good example before. The black guy who made it out. Who inspires everyone at the holiday luncheon. I'm not doing that again. Either this stays about the kids or I walk." The weight in his voice left no room for argument. Ethan sat back, exhaling slowly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the diner filled the silence, broken only by the clink of a spoon against glass. Then Ethan reached into his briefcase, pulled out the contract, and, without a word, tore the PR clause clean out. He set the papers on the table and said, "Then it's about the kids." Jordan looked at him, half surprised, half relieved. "You'd risk your company's publicity for that?" Ethan smiled. "I'd risk a lot more." When they left the diner, the sun was dipping low over the city. They shook hands in the parking lot, not as boss and employee, but as equals who finally understood each other. "Saturday?" Jordan asked. "Saturday," Ethan said. "We start again." As Ethan drove home, his phone buzzed with a dozen unread messages, but for once, he ignored them. He rolled the window down, letting the cool air rush in. For the first time in years, he felt something that didn't fit into a spreadsheet or policy memo. Hope. He didn't know it yet, but the choice he made that afternoon would ripple far beyond a single gym. It would test his courage, his pride, and his idea of what leadership truly meant. And soon, in a room full of executives and parents, he'd prove that empathy could stand its ground against every rule in the book. Saturday came brighter than anyone expected. The rain that had lingered all week finally broke, leaving the air fresh and warm. Outside the YMCA, cars lined the street, and the sound of children's laughter drifted through the open doors. Ethan stood just inside the gym entrance, holding 2 water bottles, one for himself, one for Noah, watching Jordan set up the cones and mats with his usual quiet focus. It wasn't the parking lot anymore, but somehow, the spirit of those early sessions lived in every orange marker and scuffed-up bike. Parents filled the bleachers. Some he recognized from the daycare meeting. Others were new faces, nervous, hopeful, curious. Ms. Patel had brought a clipboard and her usual calm smile, making sure every waiver was signed, every form in place. When Jordan caught Ethan's eye, he walked over and grinned. "You ready to get your hands dirty, boss?" Ethan laughed softly. "Don't call me that. Not today." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "Then what do I call you?" "Volunteer," Ethan said, tossing him a folded t-shirt with a Freshways logo on it. Jordan opened it and read the back. "Equal partner." He looked up, surprised. "You serious?" Ethan nodded. "We both are. This isn't my program or yours, it's ours. You lead the training, I handle the funding and paperwork. We split the credit 50-50. For a moment, Jordan didn't say anything. He just smiled and said quietly, "You have no idea what that means." "I think I do," Ethan replied. The first session of the official pilot began with small steps, literally. The kids lined up, each waiting their turn at the gentle incline the staff had built from wood and padded mats. Noah was near the end of the line, helmet on, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. "Eyes up, champ," Jordan said, crouching beside him. "We're not looking down today." Noah nodded, gripping the handlebars. He pushed off, feet hovering for a few seconds that felt like forever. "R." He reached the bottom of the ramp and rolled to a stop, laughing out loud. Ethan cheered before he could stop himself. "That's my boy." The parents clapped, some wiping away tears. And when Ethan turned around, he saw something unexpected. His legal team standing in the doorway, watching. They had come to inspect, maybe even to judge, but the look on their faces wasn't critical. It was moved. One of them whispered, "You did all this?" Ethan shook his head. "No, we did." By the end of the morning, the gym was alive with energy. Jordan's calm voice guided every movement, and the kids followed with a mix of focus and joy. There were no accidents, no tears, no fears left unspoken. Just laughter, sweat, and progress that no one could quantify, but everyone could feel. When the final whistle blew, the kids gathered for a group photo. Someone handed Ethan a marker to sign the banner on the wall. It read, "Eastside Adaptive Cycle Club, in partnership with Freshways and the YMCA." Underneath, Jordan added a simple line, "Started in a parking lot, continued with faith." Later, as the families began to leave, Ethan stayed behind, stacking cones beside Jordan. "You ever think it would get this far?" he asked. Jordan shrugged, wiping his hands on a towel. "Honestly, no. I just wanted to see one kid believe in himself again. Guess we both got more than we planned." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, I think we did." Across the gym, Noah was showing another boy how to balance on the bike. "You just count to 5, he said proudly. "Coach Jay taught me that." Jordan chuckled. "He's got my lines now." Ethan glanced at the boy, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "He's got your heart too." The sound of children's laughter filled the gym once more, bouncing off the walls, bright and alive. For the first time, Ethan didn't hear it as noise. He heard it as a reminder of what truly mattered. He had built a business that moved food across states, but this was the first time he'd helped move something deeper: courage, trust, and a little bit of hope. And though he didn't know it yet, that small gym would soon become the start of something far bigger than either of them could imagine. A program that would change not only Noah's life, but the lives of dozens of families across the city. But for now, in that sunlit room, surrounded by kids who refused to give up, it was enough. A few weeks later, the Eastside Adaptive Cycle Club had become more than just a weekend program. It had turned into a small movement. Word spread through local schools, parents shared photos online, and one afternoon, the city council sent a letter inviting Jordan and the team to speak at the annual Ability Day event. When Jordan showed Ethan the invitation, he laughed. "They must have run out of real speakers." Ethan grinned. "You're the realest one they'll ever get." But Jordan shook his head. "I'm not doing speeches, you know that." "Then let Noah talk," Ethan said with a wink. "He's been practicing anyway." And Noah had. Every evening that week, Ethan found his son sitting at the kitchen table with a small stack of note cards, writing and rewriting his words. Sometimes he'd ask for help spelling confidence or freedom, but mostly he just wanted someone to listen. On the morning of the event, the gym was packed. Parents, teachers, and kids filled every seat. A banner hung on the wall. Different abilities, same dreams. Ethan stood in the back, watching Noah walk slowly but steadily to the microphone. He didn't use his crutches this time, just Jordan's steady hand at his shoulder until the first step on stage was done. The boy looked out at the crowd, his voice small but sure. "My name is Noah Ward," he began. "A year ago, I was scared to move. I thought falling meant I failed, but Coach Jay taught me something. He said falling just means you tried something hard." There was a soft murmur in the audience. Noah continued. "He said if you count your steps and breathe, you'll find balance again. So I kept trying. And now I can ride down the hill without looking down. I even taught my friend to do it too." Ethan felt his throat tighten. Sarah was sitting beside him, her eyes glistening. Noah smiled toward Jordan in the crowd. "Coach Jay says courage isn't about not being scared. It's about showing up anyway." Then, to everyone's surprise, Noah turned back to the microphone. "But I learned something about my dad, too. He shows up now, every Tuesday." Laughter filled the room, warm and real. Ethan covered his face for a second, half embarrassed, half overwhelmed. When the applause finally faded, Jordan stepped forward. The host handed him the mic, but he paused before speaking. He looked out at the crowd, then down at Noah, who grinned up at him. "I'm not a big talker," Jordan began. "Most days, I'd rather fix a flat tire than give a speech. But this program started because one kid laughed in a parking lot when he hadn't laughed in months. That sound reminded all of us what progress really looks like. It's messy, slow, and sometimes louder than you expect." He glanced at Ethan. "And sometimes it takes people with very different worlds, people like me and Ethan, to realize we're all trying to do the same thing, show up, and help someone stand taller than they did yesterday." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Parents clapped, kids cheered, and for a few long seconds, no one wanted the moment to end. Afterward, as they packed up the bikes outside, Ethan said quietly, "You know, for someone who isn't a big talker, you just stole the whole show." Jordan smiled. "Nah, the kid did." Noah came running toward them, holding a certificate from the event. "Look, Dad, they called me a junior coach." Ethan lifted him in his arms. "That's because you are one." They stood there together, bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The coach, the father, and the boy who had once been too afraid to fall. Around them, laughter rose again from the kids packing up, the kind of sound that made the whole world feel lighter. And, for the first time, Ethan didn't think about work, or policies, or liability. He just thought about what it meant to show up again and again, until something fragile grew strong enough to stand on its own. He didn't know it yet, but that day would mark the start of a new chapter, not just for Noah, but for every child who would one day find their balance because someone else refused to stop believing. By summer, the East Side Adaptive Cycle Club had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a few cones in a parking lot was now a fully equipped program with waiting lists, volunteer coaches, and a partnership that stretched across the city. The YMCA had turned one corner of its gym into a dedicated space for adaptive cycling and physical therapy, and Freshways funded the expansion quietly, without the press releases or photo ops that once would have seemed necessary. Ethan still came every Tuesday. He no longer stood in the corner checking his phone or answering work calls. He was the one laying down tape on the gym floor, setting up cones, cheering when a kid made it across the ramp without stopping. Somewhere along the way, the routine had stopped feeling like volunteering. It had become part of his week, part of who he was. One late afternoon, as the session ended and the families began to head home, Ethan sat on the edge of the mat, watching Noah help a younger girl fix her helmet strap. Jordan joined him, holding 2 bottles of water. "Did you ever think we'd make it this far?" Ethan asked. Jordan shook his head. "Not like this, but maybe that's the point." "What do you mean?" Jordan smiled. "People think change happens overnight, like a miracle, but most of the time it's slower. It's just rhythm, showing up, falling, getting back up, over and over, until one day you realize you've gone further than you thought you could." Ethan nodded quietly, letting the words sink in. For a long time, he had measured success by numbers, deliveries, profits, schedules. But here, success couldn't be counted. It had to be felt. Noah came running up, holding his new certificate for completing the ramp series. "Dad, Coach Jay says I can help teach the new kids next week." Ethan smiled, kneeling to meet his eyes. "You've earned it, champ." Jordan grinned. "Told you he'd outgrow us both." Ethan looked around the gym, the mats, the laughter, the quiet pride on the parents' faces. He thought about how far they'd all come. Not just Noah, but himself too. The man who once hid behind caution and contracts had learned that sometimes the most responsible thing you can do is to trust the right people. He turned to Jordan. You know, I used to think leadership meant control. Turns out, it's just faith with a clipboard." Jordan laughed softly. "That might be the best definition I've heard." They packed up the cones in comfortable silence. Outside, the evening light was golden, the air warm with that peaceful hum that only comes after a day spent doing something that matters. Before leaving, Ethan looked back at the gym. The floor gleamed under the lights, and Noah's laughter echoed faintly as he walked toward the exit. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't luck. It was simply what happened when people chose to keep showing up, for each other, for themselves, for something bigger than fear. Later that night, Ethan found one of Jordan's old dog tags sitting on the table next to the logbook. He turned it over in his hand and smiled. On the back, Jordan had engraved 4 words, "Show up," every Tuesday. Ethan placed it beside Noah's drawing, the same one that had hung on their fridge since the beginning, and whispered, "We will." Then he turned off the light, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the world outside, steady and alive, keeping rhythm with the lessons they had all learned. Because it was never about miracles, it was about showing up until ordinary days became something extraordinary. And as always, before the story fades to black, one question remains. Do you believe that the smallest acts, repeated with love, can change everything? Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time, here at Power and Karma.